Chapter 6. Blocking enemy lines of communications. The war was a contest by both sides to control the other's logistics. The Soviets used aerial bombing, scatterable mines, crop burnings, and assaults on rural villages to drive the rural population into exile or into the cities. Their objective was to deprive the guerrilla of his source of food, shelter, and rest. The Soviet lines of communication, LOC, was a double-lane highway network which wound through the Hindu Kush Mountains, some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth. Mujahideen constantly cut the road and ambushed convoys carrying material from the Soviet Union. The Soviet presence depended on its ability to keep the roads open. Much of the Soviet combat in Afghanistan was a fight for control of the road network. Soviet security of the Eastern LOC required 26 battalions manning 199 outposts patrolling the LOCs or escorting convoys. The more open Western LOC required 3 battalions. More than 3/4 of Soviet combat forces were routinely involved in security missions. DRA forces were also tied down in LOC and area security. The resistance destroyed over 11,000 Soviet trucks. DRA truck losses were reportedly higher. The Mujahideen ability to interdict the LOC was a constant concern to the Soviets and prevented them from maintaining a larger occupation force in Afghanistan. Vignette 1. Carving up regiments on the approach to Wazi by Haji Badshah Khan. In April 1980, I set out to capture the Wazi district headquarters, which sits astride the main road between Gardez and Kaust. I had some 400 Mujahideen who came from the Dari Khel Valley. The Soroti Pass is at the northern end of the Dari Khel Valley and offers access from Gardez to Kaust. The Setakandao Pass on the main Gardez-Kaust highway was already controlled by the Mujahideen, so the Dari Khel approach was the only possible route for the DRA. In those days, we did not have base camps, but lived in our villages and used whatever weapons were at hand. We had rifles, plus some locally manufactured machine guns from Pakistan. I made my plan of attack. During the night, we moved to Wazi, which is close to the Dari Khel Valley, map 6-1 Wazi. I divided my men into groups and we surrounded the district headquarters on all 4 sides. I ordered my subordinate group commanders to wait for my signal to attack. In the morning, I intercepted radio communications between the Wazi garrison and their headquarters. The commander was asking for help and stated that he was surrounded by Mujahideen. Shortly after that, 2 helicopters came, circled the area, and returned. The commander of the garrison was Mohammed Hashem. He was from the Jaji tribe and we knew each other. He sent a mediator to me who announced that the garrison was ready to surrender. I told him to disarm his men first and then we would negotiate. He did, and then he surrendered the garrison. We captured a lot of weapons. The spoils of this action encouraged other Mujahideen to besiege other posts for their weapons. The DRA reacted to the fall of Wazi by sending 2 columns to reestablish government control. The government forces moved on 2 axes, one from Kaust and the other from Gardez. The column from Kaust reached Sadkil and formed an assembly area there. The column from Gardez approached the Soroti Pass. I began to mobilize people against the government forces. I sent Harbaki, tribe police or regulators who kept law and order in their areas, to rally the tribes, and the tribes responded since they knew that the DRA would loot the villages if they let them into the area. I assigned 2 Harbaki groups to reinforce the Mujahideen blocking DRA forces at Said Khel. I took the rest of the Mujahideen to the Soroti Pass. I arrived at Soroti in the late afternoon and surveyed the area. I determined how many Mujahideen I would need and where I would position the forces. I did not have enough Mujahideen, so I assembled some of the local barbers. Pashtun barbers usually also play drums, to play their drums to gather a lashkar. I did this to raise the whole area and to demoralize the enemy. The drummers did a great job. Warriors came from many tribes to Soroti, and soon I had a large army. Originally, I had planned to defend the pass, but when I viewed the size of my army, I decided to attack. I promised them the weapons we captured, and we attacked the column and captured weapons, trucks, and tanks. When we had dealt with the Soroti force, I left a blocking force to deal with any further columns, and then took the Lashkar to Said Kel. We cut the road to Kaust behind the DRA regiment, which was still assembled at Said Kel. Then we surrounded the regiment. It remained trapped for 20 days. The DRA sent another column out of Kaust to relieve this force, but they could not break through the Mujahideen blockade. After some fighting, the entire force at Said Kel surrendered. There were 1,300 personnel in the column, and we captured 1,200. The enemy lost another 100, either KIA or WIA. We captured all the weapons of this regiment, including 50 to 60 trucks and armored vehicles. After the surrender, the DRA Air Force bombed their own column and destroyed the rest of the vehicles in it, or we would have had even more booty. A few vehicles managed to escape from us. The father of DRA Minister of the Interior, Gula Bozi, was wounded in the fighting and managed to escape in one of the APCs. His name was Gulab Shah, and he was a member of the Zardran tribe, so perhaps some tribesmen helped his escape. Commentary. Early in the war, the Mujahideen resistance was mostly centered on the tribes. Only later, when the United States, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other countries began supplying the Mujahideen through the various religious-based factions, did the Mujahideen's primary focus and loyalty shift to the factions. The method of raising the force and fighting the DRA columns described here is a little different from what the British forces experienced fighting these same tribes on the northwest frontier. Once the Lashkar assembled, the warriors would chant and sing along with the drums. This occurred here as well. Vignette 2. Blocking the Pagman Highway by Commander Haji Akal Shah Sashak. I've been in many actions, but one stands out that I won't ever forget, because it was a very trying situation. On 4 or 5 June 1983, we were in Pagman, a district capital, garrisoned by DRA forces, which is some 25 kilometers west of Kabul. We received information one evening that a major Soviet DRA column would attempt to resupply and reinforce Pagman's garrison and government enclave. There are 2 parallel highways from Kabul to Pagman. Map 6-2 Pagman. The late commander Habibullah, the late commander Wahid, and others planned to block the convoy. They had some 250 to 300 Mujahideen armed with 2 mortars, 1 recoilless rifle, 12 RPG-7s, and some different groups. And some Kalashnikov and Enfield rifles. They assigned sectors of responsibility to different groups. Each group would block the highway with ambushes in its sector. Habibullah, HIK, Commander Aman, IUA, and I, NIFA, were given the sector from Khwajajam and Khwaja Muzaffar. Khwajajam is about a kilometer from the Cheltan road fork. We occupied positions primarily on the south side of the road. Commanders Ajab Gul, Wahid, Abduljan, and Kochi had the sector from Khwaja Muzaffar to Pajak. They occupied ambush positions, mostly on the southern side of the road. From Pajak to Pagman, Mujahideen occupied ambush positions on both sides of the road. We occupied our ambush positions at night. The next morning, the column left Kabul. As the leading armored vehicle reached Khwaja Muzaffar, we opened fire. The ambush turned into a battle as we destroyed 11 armored vehicles and 2 helicopters. Enemy aircraft and helicopters continually tried to drive us from our positions, but we held, and the fighting continued for 3 days. Even during the fight, the women from the villages would bring bread and milk forward to our positions. The whole area was actively supporting us. The inhabitants of Pagman, Oriakel, and Kaldari were feeding us. Mujahideen came from outside the area to reinforce us. Modir Zahir of Kaldari took 9 wounded mujahideen into his home. His wife cared for them, nursed them, and applied dressings on them. The Soviets tried to bypass our ambush by moving on the northern route to Pagman through Karaka. Mujahideen stopped this column at Dodamast, northwest of Karaka. The enemy then tried to bypass the Khwaja Musafir ambush by skirting around it, but the bypassing force soon fell into further Mujahideen ambushes. The center of fighting was Khwaja Musafir, and we stopped and held the enemy there. After 3 days of fighting, the enemy broke contact and withdrew to Kabul. In my sector, we lost 13 KIA and many wounded. I personally know of 20 wounded, but there were many more. The enemy lost 14 armored vehicles and trucks in my sector. I know that over 40 DRA soldiers were captured or defected. We captured hundreds of small arms during this battle. Commentary. This is an example of good Mujahideen field cooperation, not always a feature of the war. The Mujahideen cooperated and their overall formation strengthened as the battle continued, since Mujahideen came from all around the area to join the fight. The British noted that a good fight had almost a magnetic effect on the warrior tribesmen of Afghanistan, and the Soviets learned that this trait had not disappeared over time. The Soviets and DRA broke contact after 3 days, although their lines of communication were intact and the enemy was fixed in known positions. Firepower could not break the Mujahideen, and the Soviets and DRA would not commit the necessary infantry to close with the Mujahideen. The road to Pagman runs through a heavily populated green zone, and the Mujahideen were able to select and fortify good ambush positions along the route. In this summer fighting, the trees and crops provided good concealment for the Mujahideen. Vignette 3, Roadblock at Estalef, by Commander Sophie Lai Gul. In October 1983, one of my men was injured during a fight with other Mujahideen from the local area. I took a group of 20 of my Mujahideen from my base in Farza and went 5 kilometers north to Estalef. We were going to meet with local elders in Estalef to settle the dispute with other local commanders. Estalef is a popular summer resort some 40 kilometers north of Kabul. Informers told the DRA and Soviets about our gathering, and the enemy decided to attack us. The Soviet forces came from nearby Bagram, and the DRA forces came from Kabul. At night, Mujahideen patrols on the Estalef junction of the Kabul-Charikar highway reported that Soviet and DRA columns have moved from Kabul and Bagram and were headed towards Estalef. The Mujahideen alerted their men at dawn. My 20 men joined a force of nearly 100 commanded by a local commander who was the son of a leading Estalefi chieftain, Wakil Mohammed Amin Khan. We took up positions in the orchards at Dihi Khwajashan and Khabr-e-Malik, map 6-3, Estalef. We planned to block the Estalef road and deny the enemy access to the town, which dominated the fertile valley. The Mujahideen commanders divided their men into small teams of 4 to 5 men and deployed them in the orchards along the road in order to ambush the enemy column over a wide stretch. We instructed our men to let the head of the enemy column reach Khabr-e-Malik, and then everyone should open fire. As the leading vehicles reached Khabr-e-Malik, the attack signal was given and relayed through portable megaphones. We hit the lead column armor vehicle and a jeep. The battle raged along the length of the column from Khabr-e-Malik to Dihi Khwajashan. The Soviet infantry dismounted and attacked the Mujahideen positions, and heavy fighting ensued. We were scattered throughout the orchards and had plenty of room to maneuver, so it was hard for the Soviet infantry to pin us down. However, we were short of supplies, particularly ammunition. Further, the Soviets/DRA had much more combat power than we did, and they were using helicopter gunships and other aircraft against us. Since we were scattered over a wide area in small groups, Mujahideen command and control over the battle was difficult and sporadic. Coordination of the actions of the many resistance groups became very difficult. The battle in the orchards continued until 1400 hours. As they ran out of ammunition, the various Mujahideen groups withdrew in different directions and moved their wounded to safe areas. The Soviets consolidated their advance through the Green Zone, securing the high ground commanding the approaches to Estalif. I pulled my men out to Shara, about 3 kilometers northeast of Estalif. The Soviet DRA column moved to Estalif and launched an intensive search of homes. The soldiers looted homes, destroyed property, and set fire to the houses of suspected mujahideen. Many people lost their livelihoods due to their actions. The Soviets stayed 3 days in Estalif and then returned to their bases. Mujahideen casualties in my group were 2 KIA and 18 WIA. Most of the casualties were from Soviet airstrikes. Commentary. The large Mujahideen concentration in Estalif, close to Soviet DRA forces, was an extremely imprudent move. If the Mujahideen patrol had not provided early warning, the Mujahideen losses at Estalif might have been much higher. The Mujahideen deserve high marks for their quick reaction and rapid deployment along the road to Estalif. They utilized their familiarity with their home area to quickly select effective fighting positions, and they used local terrain and vegetation to conceal themselves from Soviet ground and air power. However, the Mujahideen suffered from lack of effective command and control, which prevented the timely coordination of counterattacks and countermeasures. Better command and control might have enabled the Mujahideen to hold the high ground dominating the Estalif approach and to prevent the Soviet entry. But the well-armed and supported Soviet force was able to push its way through. The Mujahideen were reluctant to become decisively engaged in a protracted battle with a much stronger, better supplied opponent. They felt that they had to survive to face this opponent over and over again. The Mujahideen lack of a structured, viable supply system hampered their tactical capabilities significantly. The Soviets and DRA deserve high marks for carrying enough forces for dismounted combat and for using them aggressively. The combination of overwhelming firepower and ground maneuver unhinged the Mujahideen defense, and the decisive action taken by the Soviet infantry forced the poorly supplied Mujahideen to break contact, leaving the dominant terrain and subsequent access to Estalif open. However, the Soviet DRA forces merely pushed at a more nimble foe and failed to try to outflank or encircle the Mujahideen force. This kept them from bringing the Mujahideen to decisive combat and allowed the Mujahideen to withdraw without heavy losses.